Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So the big question for today is, was it possible to save Star Wars after the travesty of the sequel trilogy? And I
So
have an
before
easy
we
answer.
start, it's going to be spoilers for everything Star
Yes,
Wars up until May 17th of 2023.
and and when we say spoilers, we mean spoilers for everything. The Legends books, the Western gaming system, anything and everything and all things Star Wars. If Stop now if you don't want to be spoiled. If you're not caught up on everything,
and you care.
and you care about spoilers, stop now.
All right, you've been
So,
warned. Now go ahead.
saving Star Wars. The answer is yes. The Mandalorian did it, right? It saved Star Wars.
I don't know if it saved Star Wars. It is attempting to continue to save how they screwed up those new three. And we talked about this the other day, and I think you don't like two, and
I don't like 2 or 3.
well, I don't like three either, but I liked the idea of two and where I thought they might be going in three, and I think if three had actually followed the same plot that they were trying to tell, I think three could have been really good and made two better because
And
three would have been good.
I have
But
also heard that there are other cuts of 3 that are completely different, and that like Kathleen Kennedy came in and did a complete rewrite and changed everything
who
in the
knows?
end, and who knows? So there could be like a Snyder cut version thing out there that is epic and
That we'll never see.
whatever.
But that being said, what we got was two didn't work and three didn't work, and one was a copy of
Uh,
the original. I mean, it was basically Luke's story all
it was
over
A New
again.
Hope. I mean, it
Yeah,
was almost shot for shot A New Hope, which is fine. I really liked that. It re-energized me,
it was very
and
fun.
I will say my biggest critique of the whole thing is it happens over like 8 days. There's no time in there. Where in the original trilogy there was time. In the sequel or in the prequel trilogy, there's time.
There's
And I will
lots of
say
time.
there's lots of time. And I am much more a fan of the prequel trilogy now after Clone Wars and some of the supplemental books and the Adult Swim Clone Wars cartoon. And, they fleshed out a lot to make those make more sense.
I
I'm
I thought the original adult. I don't know if it was Adult Swim, but it was the original Tartakovsky
the Samurai Jack style.
Samurai Jack style one where we're
Yeah, I think it was either Cartoon Network or
so
Adult Swim. It was
it
one of
was
those two.
Cartoon Network. It wasn't
Okay,
Adult Swim. Yeah,
okay.
but
It
yeah,
was a long
same
time ago.
channel. It was the
Yeah,
same channel on the
same channel.
TV.
Yeah.
But
Um,
those were so good, and I remember watching those before three came out. And the thing that I thought was the most amazing thing about that series is it literally ends as the movie picks up. Like
yes.
they set that whole thing, that whole scene that just sort of you feel like you're dropped into at the beginning of
Almost like
three.
Rogue One does with
Very
A New
much.
Hope. Where those movies that literally Rogue One ends and you can hit play on A New Hope
Hmm.
without the scroll, because it's the scroll, right? Um,
Yeah.
but
So
The Mandalorian.
Mandalorian,
I know some
so
people weren't
good.
happy with season 3, and I don't understand why. I get some of the pacing critiques and this and little stuff here or there, but man, it's been such a great story.
Well, I mean, if your bar is perfection, then you're
Nothing's
always going to be disappointed.
and
And
and if your bar is, why didn't we just do the stuff from the legacy legends stories, then I get why you're just frustrated. But get over it. It's gone. I mean,
it's not gonna
either
happen.
enjoy what we're doing now and appreciate those for what they were. I mean, we have alternate timeline stuff all the time. I mean, it's
Yeah,
Elseworld stuff. But now we're incorporating some of the things that made those stories awesome
yeah.
into this. I've watched Rebels. You haven't.
I'll
Uh,
get there.
and you know the Thrawn aspect and
Yeah,
stuff that come in there and interweave there. And the one I think fairly legitimate critique of the Mandalorian so far is, well, what if I didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett? What happened? And that I
that
think is fair. You know,
that
there's
was a major misstep. I think the solution that they should still do now is just tag that episode at the top of season 3 and just
yeah,
be like recommend you watch beforehand and just drop it in there for
and
people who don't know.
I also think that part of that is fallout from
All the shakeup.
the I'm saying her name wrong,
Carano.
Gina Carano being fired, and they had
Yeah.
to move the story around because it was going to be like 3 or 4 shows interlinked together.
Right.
And I also know some people complained about the Book of Boba Fett. I liked it. I liked the Book of
Now
Boba Fett.
now let's be clear. The timeline doesn't make any sense. Like
No, no, it does not.
they've screwed up the timeline. It doesn't
Yeah,
work. It's bad. But setting that aside, understanding that you have to make a coherent story work, and you have to sometimes you have to let things go. The thing my parents always says is you have to let art flow over you. Like
yeah,
some if you're trying to find perfection again, if you're trying to find perfection in something, you're going to be disappointed. So I thought it was great. I thought it told a great story.
yeah.
I've always been a kid who loved Boba Fett. You
And
know,
some people don't like non-linear storytelling. And
yes.
I think that's a fair critique. The same
Well, a lot of
reason
people
that
said about Witcher, season
I
one
was
of
going to
Witcher,
say,
people had a
season one
hard
of
time
Witcher,
with.
it took me like 3 or 4 episodes to figure it out, and then I went, oh, okay, I understand what they're doing now. And we're not going to spoil The
Yeah.
Witcher. It's just the first season's out of order.
Two there's multiple timelines in that one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually I knew that going into the first episode and it actually helped me. Like it was sort of like knowing that
I
there
think
were
I
two
warned
different
you.
timelines going on when you watch it, you're like, "Oh, okay, I see." You still don't know which one's happening when, and it doesn't really give
Yeah,
you any more information, but you do understand that like, hey, these two things aren't happening at the same time. It helps you process. But again, back to Mandalorian.
yes.
Um I I enjoyed it just as a whole. Just before we really get into the details of it, I thought it told a spectacular story
Yes.
from
And
start to finish.
I have been a fan of the Mandalorian culture since Boba Fett, and then really the one that drew me in more was the Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2. Those video games because they told some Mandalorian stories in there, and then some of the old comics and stuff that they printed back in the 90s that dealt with the Mandalorian Wars and the Tales of the Jedi. And so
Yeah,
anytime you give me Mandalorian, it's like giving me Star Wars crack, and I will just watch it. It is. And I love the gunslinger aspect. I also kind of like the fact that Din stepped back a little bit and we let some of the other people flex, you
yeah.
know?
Well, and I think let's get into the bits of this. Like oh gosh, I can't remember his name. The actor who does the voice of Den isn't most of the time isn't the actor in the suit.
Suit, yeah.
And I can't think of his name. He was in The Last of Us as well. I mean, that's the thing. The Last of Us came out and and Mando came out at the same time. The, those aren't two
Pedro
things you can
Pascal.
shoot. Thank you.
Pedro Pascal. Yeah, I was blanking on it too because when you
You
blanked on it, I was
can't
like,
shoot. You can't
and I
shoot
think
both of
it's
those at the same time. And
and I think it's
who
amazing.
cares?
But I also think it's amazing that because if you ever go back and if you haven't watched them, the making of the Mandalorian shows that Disney has done are as good as the shows. They really are. But Pedro Pascal talked about in the first one of those how John Wayne's grandson, who is one of the guys who's in the suit, what sounds like most of the time, and then there's another guy who does all the martial arts stuff. Those three worked together to make their mannerisms so that you don't know who's in the suit unless
Yeah.
they do a quick draw or they throw a punch. Otherwise, the way they made his physical movements a
Yeah.
language and an
Well,
art and a style that they can all pull off, which is cool.
and I have a feeling that they're not going to get into it. I think that would be smart for Disney to just not really get into it. But I will tell you that when Mando leans up against that tree right before that shootout that happens with the pirate guys when when he first gets back, that was John Wayne
What
leaning
Brandon
against that tree.
Brandon
I
Wayne?
mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
Brandon
but I
Wayne.
mean,
Yeah.
like, you look at that lean and you go, "Well, I know who that is."
Yes.
Like, that's not. I mean, that's who that. So,
Yeah.
but again,
And I
I
like that
don't care.
they because Brandon Wayne walks a little bit like his grandfather does in general. They kind of incorporated some of that John Wayne style
Right.
and strut and slow motion and movement. And I know you're not a huge John Wayne fan, but I've watched almost everything John Wayne's ever done. And I see him in it's like a hybrid
Hmm.
of him and Eastwood from the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly
Yeah.
spaghetti western trilogy, or the Man with No Name trilogy. All that stuff blended in, which was all
Hmm.
blended in with the original Star Wars trilogy. I mean, that's where Han Solo got a lot of the swagger and stuff, and
Right.
he shot first. Because let's be true, Han shot not yeah Han shot first. He
He
blew
shot him.
Greedo away. Just
Well, I
he
mean,
killed him.
if you really stop and break it down, what happened was Greedo sat down at the table and said, "You're worth a bunch of money, and you're coming with me."
Me and Han killed him.
And shot him. That was the
Yep.
choice. The choice was go with him or kill him, and he shot him.
Yeah.
Okay, that's who that guy is. And the thing that bothers, we'll come back, but the thing that bothers me the most about that is by taking away the fact that he shot him first, really diminishes him as a character,
Yeah, because you
because
change the swagger and the attitude and the I'm gonna do what I need to do to survive
right,
esque
right.
thing, and the edginess that was
Well,
there
and
with
it,
with Han.
he never does it again. Like, it's
Yeah,
just that, but it was like when his back, and sort of, I also find it interesting that when he touches the wall, because literally his back is against the
against the
wall,
wall.
and he
Yeah,
gets his back, and he kind of goes, "Oh, there's the wall," boom, and shoots
yeah,
him. Like, it's very poignant in the framing of that
and
shot.
and and it also makes his charge against the stormtroopers more realistic in the original cut when they're in the Death Star and they know they're surrounded, and he's like, "Well, I'm just going to go for it anyway." And they
Yeah,
kind of split up, and he goes down the hall and he charges into them, and then he runs into, and I kind of like how they added more stormtroopers in the extra cut, but or the recut one, but he runs in and he doesn't turn around and just run away. He shoots two of them, and then he turns around and
yeah.
runs away. He pops a couple of them and he goes.
I I I like I didn't like how many people were in that room. It was like a battalion,
Yeah, I know, I know.
and so like it was like, I understand you wanted to add more, George, but like that was a little too many, man.
Just a
Like, you
couple.
needed you just
Speed
needed to
break.
add like six more guys, dude. Like, you didn't need to add 45 and an ATSC. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Um.
it was an amazing season. I
Yes.
really enjoyed that we got a couple of these episodes that didn't have anything to do with Mando.
And on
Um,
that, I will be honest, because you can remember I called you
I do.
and I
Hmm.
was frustrated with. I think it's the third episode,
I think so.
but holistically, that's a wonderful episode. It's just
Yes.
I didn't want that, even though I appreciated that and it was a good episode. And I've gone back and rewatched it, but in the moment, it opens up with Mando in an action scene. And I'm like, no, oh no, oh no, they're not going to show me any more Mando until like the last 2 minutes of
And you get a
the
little bit at the
show.
very end, yeah.
But
But
it was
I mean,
so deep and important on its own. It was such a stellar episode and went a direction I didn't expect.
well, and I watched a whole lot of I actually watched one guy, but there's a one YouTuber that I watched that sort of talks about a lot of the other stuff, and he talks a lot about some of the books. I think there was a book about the Mon Mothma. I think there's a book about her that talks a lot
Now,
about the government, and
I haven't read any of the new stuff. I have read
Yeah.
all of the old stuff, and
Right.
I know Mon Mothma from that where she didn't disarm. She understood that there were
Right.
continued threats, and they never fully in the Legacy they never fully defeat the Empire. Like the Imperial Remnant never goes away. It ends up
Right.
becoming like another recognized galactic government, kind of like the U.S. and Russia in a sense, because
Yeah.
in the old series it ends up being run by Captain Pelion, who was Grand Admiral Thrawn's second in command, and he's running the Empire in a way that isn't racist. He's running it as a what he considers a better structure than the corruption that was the old Republic. So
Hmm.
like an idealized empire, and I'm not saying that's better or better or worse or whatever, but that hate and anger and pure power is not what is
Hmm.
driving the Imperial Remnant in the old story. And I always kind of like
Interesting.
that idea of, well, here's a structure that isn't so corrupt that it's ground to a halt
Yeah.
and nothing can get done. But then they also stopped being like speciesist because in
Yeah.
the old stuff, aliens basically couldn't do anything. You had to be human, and they don't do that with the Imperial Remnant stuff. Anyway,
I liked in this we got that in that same episode in episode 3 we got that sort of like, oh, this, we're just taking the Empire's mind flayer, but now it's a healthy thing for you, and
hmm
it felt very arbitrary,
oh
just sort
yeah, that
of,
was like
for
it's
the,
okay. They used it on me.
yeah,
That line was just like, oh my God, this is somebody who's been lobotomized, getting ready to
yeah.
lobotomize somebody else.
Well, but
Um,
also it felt sort of like
and,
the government making arbitrary decisions about like what is good and bad based on, well, when
and
they
then
had it, it
nobody
was bad, but
watches.
you know,
Nobody, there's no alarm bell when you crank it up to brain fry. You
right,
know,
right.
there's
They
no,
just gave
there's
it a new coat of paint.
they literally didn't remove the mind wipe option,
Right,
right? Like, okay, if this just helps a little bit, cool. Only leave first gear.
right.
Take out the other 12 gears.
No, we're not going to
But
do
no,
that.
and
But
then
I
she
mean,
doesn't
and
get in trouble for it
right, she gets
because
congrats.
later on she gets
She's
promoted.
she's promoted. We see her later. I have to say, I loved the cameo episode where we got Jack Black and Lizzo and
Oh, that was awesome.
Christopher Lloyd. And when that happened, in the moment, I thought, wow, why would you do all the big famous guest stars in one episode? And then it occurred to me that the reason that you get three famous people to do it is because it makes you not realize that one of those famous people is going to be the bad guy.
Yes, because
If
you
you,
assume that's the bad guy or that's the bad guy. How many times have we watched a crime show
yeah,
and we know who the bad guy is because we recognize the actor?
right.
You
And so
know,
if you want to have a famous person come in, especially Christopher Lloyd, because if it had just been Christopher Lloyd, then the
I,
moment you saw him, you're going to go, oh, he's the bad guy. Because
because
I
I didn't
saw him
know
and
if it was. I thought it was going to be him or Jack Black. I thought it was going to be one of the two.
exactly. I
And
saw
the
him
Jack
come up
Black
and
character made more sense
it
since he was
did.
an Imperial who
And
had
I
been.
think that was the point. I think that
That was
was
the red
the
herring. Yeah.
that was the ruse they were doing, and it worked, and it was
And
good.
and I love the callback to the Separatists with Christopher
Hmm.
Lloyd. He
That was
was
cool.
old enough to be you Empire people and Republic people and
Yeah.
I hate you all. That's why I'm doing it, right?
Did he
I also
mention Dooku or anything?
yes, he's
I
like
fuck. I
Dooku
was
was
thinking he
right.
did.
He was like
Yeah.
Dooku was right. And I saw an analysis the other day about Dooku about how he really wasn't ever a Sith Lord, which is why his eyes never went yellow and he never had the disfigurement. He was a dark side Force user to be true,
Hmm.
but he never lost the for the greater good mentality.
Interesting.
Dooku embraced almost more of a Bindu style, and haven't watched Rebels, but the Bindu, and this comes from Legends too. The Bindu were the gray Force users who, that yes,
Mm.
there's a light side, yes, there's a dark side, but it's intent and purification, and we're the ones in the middle, right?
Hmm.
and we're here,
Yeah.
we're about like peace, and neither side should be more powerful than the other, right?
So true balance.
Yes, true balance. And so not that that's what Dooku was, but he was closer to that.
Yeah.
So he, like when he goes and he kills Yondu, I think is her name, the female Yoda, which is why she's not in
Oh,
the third
right.
movie. She's in one of those shorts that they did, and we finally found out what happened to her. He didn't want to do it in the episode, in the animated episode. He didn't want to do it. You saw he didn't want to do it, but he did it because he felt he had to. You
Yeah.
know, um, he didn't want to kill Anakin. That's why he cut his arm off
Yeah.
in the second movie. I mean, Dooku was a villain, but he wasn't a bad guy.
Yeah.
And again, he saw corruption in the Jedi and went one way.
Yeah. I saw something. It was some jokey, skit thing of like, a stormtrooper and Obi-Wan, and they were talking about, he was like, "Oh, we got to stop the dark side because they're a crazy religion that wants everyone to follow their rules," and just sort of like laid out the Jedi,
Jedi, yeah,
and they're like, "But isn't that what you're doing?" No, but we're the good guys.
yeah,
Like,
but we're the good guys. And that's also part of why they say like the Jedi couldn't see what was coming because they had gotten
Mhm.
so out of tune with the concepts and the ideas. And I have
I'm
somewhere. Oh, go ahead.
I'm excited to. I'm hoping that they do something good with the new series with Rey. Like they have a chance to like redeem themselves a little bit
Yes,
with her. Like
I want
restarting
to
the
see
Jedi, and I mean like I would love to I miss that we didn't get that with Luke. We should,
again.
because
They
I
rushed it.
remember they did. They
They
rushed it.
rushed it.
And so maybe we'll get that with her.
More
And
story, less special effects.
yes,
More story, less nostalgia. And because I think they
because it
relied
was
on that too much.
I think it was at the end of the second. Was it the second one? It must have been the second one, where it was that kid who like force pulled the
Yeah,
broom
it
to
was
himself.
supposed to be the idea was the Force was supposed to have awakened in everybody across the entire
Right,
galaxy, which
right.
I also think is just complete bumpkus. That's just
Well, I
stupid.
don't. I didn't see. I didn't get it. I
Because
did. Hang on. Let me finish. I didn't hear. I didn't hear. I didn't think that it was the Force has awakened in everyone. I think I took it as the Force is the thing that's always around, whether you realize it or not, and that like what that was, it was like, look, we need to be um we make a statement in our understanding that this is a thing. It's not
yeah,
just like we
and
know it's
and
there, but it's like,
I
hey, this is
remember hearing an
so.
interview somewhere where they're like that's it. The Force has awakened with everybody, and now everybody has the Force, which just
eh,
it's like, all right, now everybody can cast a magic missile, and it's just like you've just
no, I
diluted it to the point where it's now if that had been one of the Force users who had survived, she finds him and trains him, and okay, cool. Um, and you know what? It also did disservices to all those amazing characters that were introduced in the first movie, right? Finn got screwed, Poe got ignored. I mean,
well,
and
Poe was
honestly,
introduced in the second one though, wasn't
Ben
she?
Skywalker has like zero dialogue from the time he decides to turn away from the dark side. Come on, right? I mean,
Yeah,
come
I
on.
they there were so many good opportunities to do things that didn't happen.
Yes.
Like I understand why they had Han come to Ben in the Force,
Yes.
but it should have been Anakin. Like
Or
the
Luke.
one,
Yeah.
but he was so focused on Anakin, and
They could have pulled Hayden Christensen in, and that would have
absolutely.
been that.
I mean, I think
Even if it was both of them, like because Han showed up not as a Force ghost. Let's be honest. He wasn't blue. He was just
that's
standing
yeah, he was
talking to
just
him.
there, right?
Now, if if Ben had seen that, and then Anakin steps up next to him as a blue Force ghost, and he's like, he's right. You're talking to he's
Yeah.
there was
I,
just,
I I think
and
there
to
were
be fair to
better
those
ways to do
movies,
that.
there are parts of every one of those movies that I love, right? As much as I
Yes.
despise the second film, Luke showing up as the Force projection and just dusting
Is
off his
just
shoulder,
the dopest
this, yeah, and
move
then
ever.
fighting Ben and never even bothering to parry him. He just moves out of the way.
It's so
It's
good.
so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's
Um,
it's the ultimate samurai fight, sort of,
yes,
very much. And as much as I didn't like some of the action that took place during that fight, like the whole thing with the guy and the girl and the thing. I mean, they make them too. They try to make them too big, which
yeah.
is what I sort of like. What I like about Mandalorian
Mando,
is that because the
small.
budget is smaller, they have to make those scenes count. And I think
Yes.
what is a 20-minute action scene in a movie should only be 5 minutes, but they want to make it a set piece, and
Or or you go back to the Return of the Jedi formula where there's another story being cut between the
very
dogfight scenes,
yes,
right?
which is
Because
great.
that's 20 minutes long and it works because it's Luke and it's talk and it's sword fight and then it's space fight and then it's ground
Hmm.
combat and then it's back. Now, unless you're doing Lord of the Rings and a massive set piece battle like the Rohan charging into the hordes in the third movie, you don't need. I mean, it doesn't work. It doesn't work the same way. It just doesn't hit the same way. It's not the same. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mando keeps things small and samurai and western. And for those people who don't understand that, the westerns are based on the samurai stories, and almost shot for shot. Go watch the Seven Samurai, and go watch the Magnificent Seven, the original one. It's the same movie. Getting back to Mando, we have a smaller, more intimate story now,
Hmm.
which has taken time to develop characters, even the side characters, which I think is important.
Yes.
And season two did such a good job introducing some of the other Mandalorians that I got a super awesome surprise. I know this didn't hit you as big because I'm a pro wrestling fan. Because Sasha Banks, or
Yeah.
Mercedes Monet, as she's going by now, had said, "I'm not in season three. I'm not in it. I'm not in it. I'm not coming back this season. They don't need me. I'm not back." And she doesn't have any dialogue, but she's there, and we see her. Even in the fight, they made sure to pull her out in one scene and give her her due. And she's, and I love that they cast a pro wrestler as that because in season three, the few scenes that you see her face in, she's telling a story with her looks and the look across the way, talking to like her and Axe, I think is his name.
I think that's right.
Yeah. But like, Bo says something and then Axe looks at her and she's so good because she spent, you know, like 15 years learning to tell a story with her facial expressions in her body that she doesn't have to say anything for you to
Yeah.
pick up what's going on. And so I just kind of nerded out. I was like, Sasha Banks is back. That's awesome. Um, and it's really kind of interesting, and I now know why Axe wasn't in the season finale of season
I heard about
two,
that. Yeah.
because Katie Sackhoff gave an interview where they're like, yeah, we shot his death scene. And then they realized, yeah, that really should have been Din anyway and not him. And so we cut it. So we just didn't know that he was dead, so we could bring him back. And I was like, whoa, that changes
Yeah.
everything.
So they were like, that's why he wasn't in the last scene.
Or
But I
the
mean,
whole last episode. I mean,
yeah,
because I always
I
wondered. I was like, where did he go?
he was in the can.
Yeah.
But I love that we got some great at the beginning, and then later on we got some great Mandalore stuff where they were on the
The
planet and out
Mandalorian
there.
lore, right? Um,
I thought the Mythosaur stuff was really cool. I'm excited to see where that's going.
I loved the growth of the heavy trooper and the armorer because they were both written to have died off in season one, but apparently
And
they
the
people liked them enough that they brought them back.
and the heavy trooper is a
Pretty major character.
important family
Yeah.
of the
Um, if
Mandalorian culture.
if you go back and watch Clone Wars and you go back and watch Rebels,
No.
he is of the lineage of the people who were ruling the planet,
Yeah.
and he's like one of the younger brothers from that, or like a nephew or something like that. And his son is still alive. That's who they
Right, he
rescued.
was the one they were initiating at the very end of the
Yes,
whole series. Yeah.
yes, and he and Axe were fighting because they had different philosophies, and it was stopped. And after his death, Axe takes his son on as his ward because that's why they're standing off together. So there's all this subtle storytelling that's going on,
Hmm.
and you're seeing the clans come together again, and that's the big thing.
Somebody talked about one of the guys that I was watching. They make a lot of references that it's the Jewish people, that the
There's a,
story
a
is
lot of
a lot
analogies to
of,
the Jewish people, yeah.
yeah,
The
of
the,
the
the, the
lost
lost
tribes and
tribes,
the, yeah.
and the
So,
warring tribes, and the split
mhm.
tribes, and the slightly culturally different tribes, and how they're lost and wandering in the wilderness, and they don't have a
It's
home.
interesting.
And it's a good analogy, whether that's what they intended or not. It's a good
Yeah.
modern analogy.
I
Um,
I'm very excited for the potential of, I mean, I have loved the lone wolf cub piece of this that we've gotten the whole way through, of the samurai with the child that he sort of has to take along with him and raise and care for, and now that it's Din Grogu, and like,
yeah,
I loved the ending at the farmhouse, because you're like, you know that the second after it cut, someone walked up and went, "I have a job for
for
you,"
you, yes.
and I'm really hoping that next
And it was
season,
it was
I'm
an
hoping that
elegant
they,
way. No, go ahead.
I'm hoping that they really sort of go back to what we got in season one again. Like, I'd really like to see some, just like, I got a mission, I got to do a thing,
So
I've got to,
that's what I was going to say. It's an
yeah.
elegant way to bring back the canceled Rangers of the Republic, because that's
Hmm.
effectively what they've done. Is instead of Gina Carano's character being the ranger going and hunting all this down, now it's Din Djarin, but they had to get him there. They couldn't just
Right.
slot him in. And I love the way that they took the I think he's one of the directors, the Asian guy with the beard.
No,
No, he's not
he's
a
not.
director. Okay.
He's the guy from, let me get this wrong, I want to say it's Kim's Grocery. Like, there's
Okay.
a show
So
about an
he's an
Asian
actor.
family that runs it, and but
Okay.
he is apparently a Uber fan, and the
Who basically did
uniform,
it for scale,
well, the
right?
uniform that he wears is
His
his.
uniform. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
he
awesome.
made that. That's his cosplay uniform, and they were like, "Yeah,
You want to be
you're good."
Star Wars? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no, he brought his thing with him to shoot, and they looked at it and they went, "Yeah, we're fine with that. You're
Yeah.
good. You're
That's
you're in
awesome. Showing
spec."
showing up to costume and being like, I already got it.
Yeah, I'm set, man.
uh, but I love how his character has developed out of necessity now
Yeah.
to be like, look, New Republic, there's problem. Yeah, well, they hadn't signed the charter yet. But what? Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to go around you.
Yeah.
There's a bigger problem, and we're seeing the seed. At least we're seeing the seeds planted to try. So, to me, these shows are doing what Clone Wars did to fix a lot of the critique of the original or the prequel trilogy when
Yeah.
it came out. Um, and they're doing it in a small scale way, and and I just I haven't been this excited about Star Wars since watching it as a little kid or playing the game I played in college, because I was in a role play
Yeah.
game that a buddy of mine set like 100 years in the future with an alternate timeline, and it ran for like 6.5 years, and we played every week, right? So it's and the Timothy Zahn, I feel like I'm watching the Timothy Zahn
Yeah.
trilogy again, and which is, if you've never read any of the old Star Wars books, find the original Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire books and go read them. They are three of the best novels for Star Wars ever written.
Yeah. You're not wrong. Um, I read those when I was younger. I really enjoyed it just because it was a fun story, and I was younger at the time because they are. But it was the Young Jedi series. They
I read
did
all those too. They were great. I
about
wasn't a youth anymore, but I read them. They were
Jaina and Jason, and their
and
son. The
Anakin.
kid was Anakin, and he
Anakin.
went dark again. And I mean, it was a
No,
whole. There
actually,
was, no, no, it
Jason
wasn't. It was
Jason
Jason
went dark. Anakin sacrifices himself
himself. That's
and
what it
dies.
was.
And
Yeah.
that's such, and I so angry when it happened, but it was so beautifully written because there's almost an entire chapter dedicated to the split second before he makes the decision, where the
Hmm.
Force lets him see what'll happen if he sacrifices himself and his life with the girl he's falling in love with. And so he sees both
Oh,
paths and then chooses the one that saves more people, which is to die.
yeah.
And then that leads to them being able to defeat the Yuuzhan
I
Vong,
had forgotten
which is
that.
a
I don't
which
know
is
if I
the
ever
people who
actually
are
finished it all.
is the people who are invading from outside the galaxy. Which in the
Yeah.
story, the Emperor had foreseen, which is part of why he formed the Empire, because he knew this threat was coming,
Right.
and the Republic couldn't stand up to it. So it wasn't
Right.
just because he wanted pure power; he needed a massive military. And I'm like, oh my God, that is a
Yeah.
layer of
Well,
depth I
what
never expected.
yeah, what that does is it gets again that thing of like the only way to take care of this is I've got to have a massive army. The only way to do that is I have to do it. And so for the good of everyone,
Yeah.
we got to take over the universe, the galaxy or whatever. And
I
then
have
you
to I
reach
have to get the power, but along the way I get corrupted while I'm
gets
doing it.
yeah,
Yeah,
cuz yeah.
because there's
So,
there's a great scene in one of those books where they're fighting these aliens that they haven't been able to stop in any way, shape, or form. And Wedge Antilles, who is the unsung hero of the original Star Wars trilogy, for those who don't know, Wedge is the guy who survives the first Death Star trench run. He's the guy who's in the Battle of Hoth, flying the speeder. He's the guy flying the X-wing when they go and blow up the other Death Stars. He's the only man who survived two Death Star runs, and is the star of the book series The Rogue Squadron and Wraith Squadron, which are also great books if you've never read the Stackpole books. They're wonderful. Anyway, they get ready to fight these aliens that nobody can, and they're like, well, do we fight them like the Republic? Do we fight them like the Rebel Alliance? And he goes, no, 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 no. We're going to fight them like the Empire. And they're like, what?
yeah.
And then you realize that these aliens like to land on the planet, and they send their people in, and he parks a super star destroyer in orbit and turns it sideways and just lays waste to everybody from orbit. And you're like, oh, that's what those were really built for. Not space combat, to utterly destroy everything on a continent. That's why that exists. And he's like, yeah, this is what they were designed to be used for. And they just never have. And now I whip their ass. And
Nice. So,
so
back to Mandalorian.
back to Mandy. But I think they can bring those kind of characters in. The
Yes.
Wedge characters can star. I'm
I'm
really
I'm
excited
looking
to
forward to
see.
see where they're going.
I really hope Boba Fett comes back in. I know there's some drama going on right now, so you might not, but I'd love to see more Boba Fett. I'd love to see more of the Asian ninja assassin who's helping him that I'm blanking on her name. She was
Ming
in
Na
Shield.
is her,
Yeah, she was in Agents
but
of
I
Shield.
can't think of her
Um,
character's name.
I want to see more of Timothy Oliphant's Marshall, character come back.
Didn't he die?
No, at the very end of Boba Fett, he's in the Bacta tank.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're
Yeah,
right. You're right.
yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
Um,
No, but I mean, and to sidestep to this, I haven't finished Andor yet. I'm gonna get to it because
that
I
one
really
was a
do want
slow
to.
burn. It was good.
But I know it's a political show, but I like
Yeah,
those, so
it's
I'm fine
it's
with
it.
it.
Season one of Andor was not what I was expecting at all. It was good, but it was not what I
Yeah.
was expecting at all.
But I finally sat down and watched Obi-Wan,
Yeah.
and I overall enjoyed the story. I thought
Yes.
it was very I liked the progression. I liked how they reintegrate. It was well
I
done.
love the addressing of the PTSD.
It was it was all good. The and I've my only gripe, which I
Which
feel
is
like is a big
legitimate.
one, which is
It's a
a bit and
legitimate
it
one.
feels huge, is there were too many oops they slip away moments.
Deus
You
ex
know,
machina.
yeah, there was the fire that somehow stops Darth Vader when he just
It
blew
was
it
like
out four
every
seconds
other
before.
episode. It was like every other episode.
Yeah. The only one that I actually was okay with was the one where they trick him and they fly off in the other ship, because that
That
was the
made
only one
sense.
where because I was like, because I went, well, why didn't he stop it again? I went, because he's wiped. Like that was
Yeah.
it. Like doing that
Not easy.
is
Yeah.
yeah, but
The one
but
that
that was
got
a
me the most, the one that made me the angriest was
was
the
the
two
the
air
base.
speeders coming into
Jeez.
the base. Like, they're not space capable. They don't have a hyperdrive. You don't
Yeah,
have a
where did they
transport that can
go?
carry them. How did they sneak into the secret base that's supposed to be protected by TIE
Impenetrable.
fighters? Yeah, that was just,
Yeah, it
I
was.
was just like, no, I'm
You
sorry,
they
just no.
you didn't attack it initially because it was unattackable, but
Impeccable. Yeah.
you could
I remember
again.
when I watched that episode and it happened, I actually said out loud, I was watching it alone. There was nobody in the house. I went, "Oh, come on, really?"
Yeah,
It was like, and when
and
you do
again,
that to a show, it's kind of stepped in it one too many times, right?
right, and again, I didn't stop watching it. I wanted to see how it goes. I loved that Hayden Christensen came back and
Oh yeah,
got
the
to sort
the
of.
final confrontation between Obi-Wan and
Oh,
Vader,
you didn't do this. I
beautiful.
killed him.
Yeah,
Just spectacular.
and
Just it,
drives home what Ben said in the first movie.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I loved that in that moment it it let Ben let that go. Like
yes.
yes, you have I
He
mean you had
stopped
something.
feeling guilty,
Yeah, this what you didn't do it. It wasn't just you.
which
There was more to this than just what you
which
did.
sets up a scene that you haven't seen yet, where in Rebels,
Hmm.
where Ben Kenobi finally
Oh yeah.
comes face to face with Darth Maul, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
you may have seen the clip. I may have sent you the clip of it because you don't really need to watch anything else to watch
I
it.
don't think I've watched it
But
yet.
in that clip, what happens is Obi-Wan has a fighting style from the original prequel trilogy,
I've
right?
heard about this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in the Clone Wars and all that, where he's real bouncy, zippy, right? He holds lightsaber up with like his fingers out. But that style is not what he uses in A New
No,
Hope
he
at
shifts
all.
to a
To
different
defensive
defensive style.
stance,
Yeah.
and he does that shift in the moment in the episode when Darth Maul's like, "I'm going to kill you now," and Darth Maul goes into this spinny, jumpy, flippy thing that he does, and rather than meet him on those terms, because the fight takes 3 seconds, which is not what I was expecting, but it's beautiful. Again, it's one of those samurai moments where you have
Yeah.
two masters come together, and it's
And it's just
literally
one stroke.
it's kind of it's literally parry parry slice, and the fight's over,
Yeah.
and you're just like, and then Ben comforts him as he dies.
Yeah.
So he's not fighting him out of hate, and he wasn't going to fight him at all until he realized that Ben was there protecting someone. And only at that point
Yeah.
did Ben decide that he had to turn his lightsaber on because he was defending someone. He was
Yeah.
not, yeah. Which,
I
back to
I
the
loved
Mandalorian.
before you go back to the Mandalorian, let's stay on Obi-Wan for
Yeah.
2 seconds. I loved the girl they got to play Leia. I thought she was spectacular
Yes.
and did a great job. The boy they got to play Luke was great, and
Yep.
I did love that they brought back the two actors who played Owen and
Yeah,
Baru,
that was
especially
wonderful.
because the actor who plays Owen is actually like
He does
kind
a
of really
lot.
famous now. Like he's actually a much larger movie star than he was then.
Yes, and he has
Um,
a fairly significant part in the show. He's not just a bit part. I mean,
yeah, but
he
I
doesn't
thought that
do
was
a lot, but
really
what he does is drastically important.
I thought it was really great in that moment to show because if you all you know about them is that those few little moments in the first episode before they die and they're the one no you don't want to do that and stay here and then you see this and go like oh no they really did actually love and care about him
For him, and they
and
were
were
trying
willing
to
to
protect him.
die to take care yeah so like
Yeah.
it I thought it didn't not that they needed to be redeemed in some sort of way but it did
No,
felt
but
that it
it
gave
made them
their
deeper.
sacrifice have impact and yeah
Yeah, it makes it more. Going back and watching it all now, it makes it much more meaningful. You know.
absolutely. Okay, back to
Um,
Mando.
and on what I was saying about like Obi-Wan being defensive, the fight in the season finale of Mando with Grogu is
Hmm.
beautiful because Grogu uses the Force, but he never strikes out at anyone.
Yes.
He's only tripping, pushing, moving a gun out of the way, jumping out of the way, stopping a fireball. He is using the Force to protect and defend,
Right.
which is beautiful because he's also he's helping his dad and they're saving each other and and the choreography in that episode was amazing. The hallway they pulled off a hallway fight scene without it being in a hallway, and it's like almost like a fighting video game, and it's almost like a joke because I don't have any weapons. All right, I kill this guy. I try to grab the blaster, it falls off. All right, and
It was good.
that it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
I love that we've brought in the red astromech from A New Hope is the same astromech, and
Amazing.
they've said that's who it is, and that we
Well,
find out he actually fought in the rebellion at some point,
yeah.
and
Amazing. Such
you
good
know,
stuff. And then I loved that Grogu was in the mech for a little while and had the
yeah,
ability to say yes
no,
and no
no,
was pretty
yes, no,
spectacular.
no, no, yeah,
That was
um,
good. But I mean, it was what I liked about it, honestly. And again, getting it's more into like the idea behind it is that like one, you gave him a voice for a minute, you
yeah,
used it as a joke, and then
but
you were
not,
also able to have an incredibly impactful moment. I mean, they were the funny moment out when he's out in
yes,
the
yeah,
market, and you get to have the humor, but then you didn't. It wasn't just a joke. You
no,
actually
because
then used it
he steps in between the two Mandalorians and pushes them
and
apart.
says
No,
no.
no,
Yeah.
right? And then when
It's
they go
great.
after his dad, he's like, no, no, no. It's like,
Yeah,
don't hurt him, don't hurt him. And
very
then
good.
when Bo says the line from Clone Wars, or I'm sorry, from Rebels, it's like she said the line, and the line is, Mandalorians are stronger together.
Oh, is that what that's
Yeah,
from?
because there's a point in Clone Wars, or I'm sorry, in Rebels, where they kind of take back Mandalore before it gets
Mm-hmm.
bombed. And she's like, we're stronger together. And that's why you should be the leader, as you have this philosophy. And then that kind of fell away as she kind of got old and bitter and frustrated about everything. And then, and I think depressed because she didn't do as good a job as her sister was. Um, but then she gets back to that we're stronger together mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I also love the fact that they went ahead and smashed the dark saber, so
Yeah.
that's
I
not the
like
thing
that we
anymore.
removed that MacGuffin. It was I wasn't a fan of it. It
Well, and
didn't.
it's not needed for who's in charge now.
Hmm.
That's it. When
Well,
items
it
dictate,
was a nice way of sort of doing that all at one in one chunk. Was we need to remove this thing, but we also need to make sure that it's not removing the seat of power, and they were sort of able to put it all together in one big thing.
yeah,
I will say, I did the again it being going back to the Christopher Lloyd episode. I loved that we got a little procedural detective episode
we got a
to
buddy cop
like.
movie.
It was great.
I
To
could
the
watch
two of
Bo-Katan and Din Djarin buddy cop all day long. You know,
I mean it was great. They got to do all the little things. And they went and did an investigation. I mean, and that's what probably what he does. Go and try and figure something out. You know, it
Well,
was
and
nice that they did a
at some points she knows what's going on, and at some points like he takes over and it's like, I know these people, I know how to
yeah.
talk to them, you know.
And
Yeah, it's just great stuff.
yeah, I mean, and I could go on and on. There's, I mean, when she comes and saves him, I don't know. Did you see the clip of Katie talking about when Den shows up and she's like draped over the chair?
Yeah,
Have you
yes.
heard her talk about it?
Oh
Somebody
yes,
made a
the
video.
percentages.
No, 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 not that.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so there's a they said she watched the video. I think her husband or her sister or someone was a family member was like, "Really? Like, why is she laying like that?" And so she was like, "Well, in my mind, she was like, it's Den," and like ran and
Ran
put all
in
her
there.
stuff on
I
and
saw
like
somebody did like a
and
YouTube video of it and run
and
in there
she
because
saw
yeah,
that and was commenting on like that was what I saw in my head was her just being like, "Oh no," and having to run and
running to get there.
but
That's great.
again, even that scene where like the thing gets bombed and they the air all the space fights have been spectacular. The
I
aerial com I
I
mean,
actually love that they put some tactics in it because
hmm
they knew they had to invade the ground, so there went their air support. So they kept the capital ship up there as a distraction, and how,
yeah,
well, the capital ship by itself is vulnerable to bombers, and starfighters and stuff, and then just that's such a Mandalorian move is like, I'm gonna ride the thing down, but also I'm gonna get out and come and
yeah, right at the
fight you.
end
I'm
before I
not gonna
die.
die, but I will give you the biggest giant middle finger that I can.
I
Um,
I don't know how I felt about Grogu being able to stop the fireball. It
so
felt a little overpowered to me.
that was intentional, and you haven't seen Rebels. So again,
Okay.
that is a direct callback to a scene in Rebels to show you just how powerful Grogu really is.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to spoil it for you. I mean,
I
I don't
don't
want to
care.
spoil.
Tell me. I don't
So,
care.
well, there is a scene in Rebels, and again, I still stand by this. Rebels is, for visual, the best single Star Wars story that has been told because it has a very definitive beginning, a very definitive middle, and a very clear ending, right? It
Hmm.
is like Clone Wars, all the other ones kind of blend into each other, but this one, while it touches everything else, it is a encapsulated story that was told from beginning to end with
Hmm.
no cuts. Like, it didn't get canceled. They didn't have to come back and do extra seasons later. Right. So
Right.
one of the characters is Kanan Jarrus, who he was a Padawan who survived
Is that
Order
the oldest
66.
one that's Freddie Prince is
Yeah,
doing the
that's Freddie
voice
Prinze
of? Yeah, yeah,
Jr.'s
okay.
character. Um, and he has his story, and he's the father figure of the group.
Yeah.
And there is a moment where they're standing on top of a fuel cell, and they're about to get away. And the crazy Imperial governor has a walker shoot the fuel cells. And he realizes that he can't save everybody. So he stops the fireball, and then he has to make a choice: hold the fireball back and everybody dies, or let it go and push everybody away. It is almost a shot for shot scene. And he's just not strong enough. He wasn't trained enough. He denied the Force for a long time, and but he was still a powerful Jedi. Grogu is that much stronger.
Hmm.
And there are hints that it's the Yoda species, and that's part of it, and they live so long, and they're small but powerful, and he had been trained for like 35 years by Yoda, and Luke says in the Boba Fett series, well, I didn't really train him, I just helped him remember. And
Yeah.
in all honesty, Grogu may be a more holistically trained Jedi than Luke. And we
That's
know
true.
Ahsoka is a more holistically trained Jedi than Luke. Luke had basically no training. He had
He
the
was
six
only
or
on
seven
Dagobah
months,
for
like
yeah,
6 or 7 months, right, or something
yeah,
like that.
something like that.
Uh, so I understand how it felt overpowered, but having seen the other show and knowing it was directed by the same guy and written by the
Right.
same guy, he was intentionally telling a story.
Right. The I think the it's just hard to it again, it's so much power that you have that moment of like, did you really mean that much power?
Yes, and
You know, like,
with the
because
way they're
that's
telling these
crazy.
stories, with the way they're
Yeah.
well, because one of the things they talk about in the it never got confirmed, but they talked about it in the last battle of wherever they found Ray, the planet they found Ray on, and she's scavenging the Star Destroyer,
Jakku,
Jakku. Apparently,
I
like
think.
Luke pulled the Star Destroyer out of orbit.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you won't talk about power, just like yank, and the ship crashes. Okay,
Oh, is that where the ship came from that they're
that's the I think that's hinted at in the books is Luke yanked
interesting.
the Star Destroyer out of orbit, and then the Empire fell. Like at that point they surrendered because it's like
Wow.
we're not even fighting people anymore. We can't win. If he can just if he can just pull us out of orbit, we can't win, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I was gonna say something to kind of wrap up. What I want, if they do the new series and Rey is reforming the Jedi Order, she's
Okay.
gonna look for people. So maybe she
Okay.
finds old Ahsoka if she's still alive, right? And I'm waiting for this little armored up, green ear pointed out, helmeted guy to stroll in and be like, I heard you were looking for a Jedi. It's just
Well,
like
I mean, but
with all the
it's only
swagger
gonna
that we
be,
see,
but it's only gonna be
it's
10 years later,
no, 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 it's
20
like another
years.
20, it's like 20 years. So Grogu could be just in his bounty hunting prime at that point as a bounty hunting Mandalorian
But
Jedi.
yeah, I see. Here's the problem that I
Because I've
run
seen the
into.
fan art with it, man. The little Yoda
Yeah,
lightsaber with him, and there has
I
been a Mandalorian
wonder.
Jedi in the past. So,
I wonder how much of a baby Grogu actually is.
well, I think
Like,
he's maturing. Because another thing I think they've done bad, to be fair, they haven't been good about telling us how much time has passed between season 2 and season 3. Because
yeah,
I have heard them say it was like 6 or 7 years or something like that. But a significant amount of time. Like
that's
Grogu was with
crazy.
Luke for years. It wasn't quick,
If that's
you
the
know.
case, they need to be specific about that because
Yeah,
that's very different. Because it
yeah,
did feel very
fast.
like he was there and gone.
Yes, and it was supposed to. Again, I think this is the failure of them canceling that show for
Yeah,
stupid political reasons and comments, and they've had to adapt. But time
yeah,
happened. Time happened. Din was on his own for a while, and you know, and
yeah.
I've also seen hints that the reason Ahsoka was there was like she and Luke had a little bit of a thing, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. You're dating your master's kid. That's a little okay, but
That's kind of
that
strange.
might just be
Because
like fan
like,
rumors.
because I mean, that's sort of like you would say Anakin and Ahsoka weren't really father. It wasn't like a fatherly relationship, but it was definitely a
Brother and
brotherly
sister
relation
relationship.
with your
Yeah,
yeah.
there was the mentor
So
aspect, but it was
that's
the big brother little sister
sleeping with your brother's
his
kid.
kid. Yeah, I know it's weird.
It's a
Um,
little weird,
yeah, it's a little creepy. Plus the whole age thing too. Although she's alien, so
but
who the
it
hell
is
knows?
Rosario Dawson, so I mean you
So
can't
yeah,
fault Luke.
yeah,
So
no, no, not at all. And you know what? I think one of the biggest tragedies of Luke, like going being weird hermit Luke, we don't get the Mara Jade Skywalker story, which was one of
yeah,
the best stories. And you know,
I we can end it on this. I was disappointed with the way that they handled Luke, and I think Mark Hamill has made his opinions
he's
on it very
very clear
clear.
about it. Yeah.
and I don't disagree. And I think they did a disservice to the character, and I will remember the Luke that was in the
In the
legacy,
Legacy
in the
era.
legends or whatever. I
Legends.
mean, because
Yeah.
like
That's
that
Luke
was the Luke
Skywalker.
that I grew up with, and
Yeah.
I like
That
that
Luke
Luke.
Skywalker who raised his kid who was named Ben Skywalker.
Yeah,
And yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So,
So if you haven't read them, go read them. They're wonderful books. It can
and there's
only
tons
enhance your
of
Star
them,
Wars. Oh,
tons
yes.
of them.
Yeah.
All right, have a good one, everyone.